Well, hello, friends, and thank you for returning to a second interview with Alistair Hawks and the Hike for Evolution model that she and her brother Dallas are bringing to the world. As we mentioned last time, both Alistair and I have had extensive experience with the work of this genius woman that I have described, Dr. Liana Matulich. And Alistair and her brother, Dallas, are actually bringing that work forward to the world right now because Dr. Matulich has retired. So we talked in Alistair, hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Bill.
We talked last time in very general terms about the massive sort of global umbrella of this work because it is both broad and deep. I mean, it's not like the famous mile wide and an inch deep or an inch wide and a mile deep. It's the whole package. It is quite extensive. Why don't you pick it up from that first time and give us a sense of, are there some ground in all of that grounding concepts or a grounding framework of some kind that we can use as a first step for really stepping into the realities of the work?
I would love to, Bill. I mean, that's a really tall order. Thank you. Thank you for having me here in this whole series. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds. And to get deeply into the Hike for Evolution material, I'll just say HIKE, HIKE, is an acronym for Human Inner Keys for Evolution. And in this work, what we're doing as we practice these practices of power, these exercises, these movements, we are discovering, we are on a journey of discovery, self-discovery. Leanna calls it a NASAC journey. And we are looking for these inner keys that help us identify states of consciousness or states of calm and clarity for just the layperson that arise within us as we use mindfulness practices or meditation or any of the tools that the people in your series are using. And so I'll start there, and then I'll say that one of the main um, principles of the Hike for Evolution material is that intellectual information alone is never enough to create real change in people. And I mean that to say, when we are thinking through things, when we're thinking about possibilities, we're in a state of thinking, of considering, of taking in information. And when we're using the practices in the Hike for Evolution system, when we're discovering our inner keys, we are in a process of remapping or looking deeper past the intellect. And so, one of the first things that we teach in Hike for Evolution are some basic practices to get familiar with what's going on in our bodies, what's going on in our minds. We're using biofeedback principles like applied focus and concentration or concentration. I mean, that's a practice that we all either learn or don't learn. I think we should probably teach it in kindergarten. Um, but as we consider these basic exercises of power, we're working on many different levels of mind. And for Hike for Evolution purposes, we're talking about 7 different layers of mind. You want me to talk about those
Wow.
7 layers?
Well, does now you know about the seven layers because you're the master. But does a person, a student of the work, have to know the seven layers in order to work with them, or are you just in a subtle way guiding them level to level and they kind of discover it experientially?
Yes, yes on both. We are
Okay.
encouraging people to consider, to actually just know or perceive within them that on many different levels, we are engaging with ourselves, we're engaging with the world. Our culture tends to favor the intellect, and so it's my understanding or my thought that when people are considering ideas or practices or bodies of knowledge or ancient wisdom traditions, we're kind of using our intellectual mind. We're like gathering information, we're doing research, we're considering options, we're taking in information. So that's the intellectual mind. That's the one that we're mostly familiar with, I think, in just in general terms, in culture. That's what's favored.
Well, everything with the capital E in our education system is about that. It's how much content, how much information, how many ideas can you assimilate and make sense of, et cetera, in order to pass our tests or or get our credentials in these various courses, et cetera. That's all one-dimensional learning.
Yeah.
It is just about all the cognitive stuff that our mind is doing, but it isn't about application. It isn't about application in context. It's devoid of other interpersonal qualities that affect everything. It's just how good a thinker are you? Or, I mean, it's everything about IQ, and it's not about any of the other cues, as it were, that represent living a full life.
That's so very true. I used to teach a curriculum called Brainwise in the public school setting. And what I realized is that public school, sorry, public school, but all you really teach is what to think. You're teaching people what to think, not how to
Yes,
think, or not
yes,
how
yes.
to think on multiple levels. And so when we start doing this self-development or self-transformation a la Hike for Evolution, we start looking at all of these different levels of mind that we are learning and engaged in life with. And so, what I tell my clients in my psychotherapy practice is that you can't get this isn't a thinking thing. You cannot get out of this problem by thinking your way through it. You can consider and you can reflect and you can do all of those kind of thinking activities, but a lot of times we need to go into a different level of mind so that we can look at history or we can look at trauma or we can look at body imagery or brain injury and that's an inside job. That's inside the body. So, and that's a concept that we talk about all the time is opening perceptions, how we use these practices to
Mhm.
open perceptions. And when you're learning a new curriculum or when you're taking a class, a lot of times we're not really intending, like this is my intention to open perceptions. But what happens when you start considering all these different levels of mind is your perception opens that we're looking beyond intellect at this point we're looking beyond intellect, but where are we looking beyond intellect? Well, we're looking at the subconscious or we're looking at the unconscious, and those parts of our mind are programmed or conditioned through life experience at different times throughout our developmental stages. And so, but these come into practice as we begin to either function on an optimal level or become dysfunctional because we are caught up in the residue of living, of not really knowing how to apply intellect to heal our subconscious mind. And so we've got the intellect, we've got the subconscious, we've got the unconscious mind. But then we go into the body mind where we've got instinct and we've got reflex. And that would be the considered the automatic somatic pilot. And so our body mind, and we all know this, you and me and Leanna and anybody else who has been alive for the last 50 or 60 years, the body mind connection is real. It's a thing.
Yes.
And I'm dumbfounded sometimes when I talk to new therapists who are kind of getting churned out of these psychology programs that it's not a thing in a traditional psychology program. The body mind connection is still like a mystery in some literal schools. And so in Hike for Evolution, we're taking it for granted that we're working at the body mind level, that we're working at the cognitive level, that we're working at the intellectual level and the subconscious level and the unconscious level and the instinctive level and the reflexive level. So, all of those levels of mind, you don't have to understand the 7 levels of mind to reap the benefits of the practices. But the
Uh-huh. Good.
practices, yes, are all designed to work with yourself physiologically at all of these different levels. Okay. So subconscious mind, we might use symbols. We might use images. We might use sensations to just kind of hone in on how that part of our mind affects our behavior or our engagement or lack of engagement or our awareness in any given moment. All right.
Mhm.
As we do these basic practices, we are creating a way for all of these levels of mind to work together and to develop a more optimal kind of directive, or you've heard Leanna talk about the director of the orchestra or the conductor of the orchestra. So as we
Mhm.
use these practices, these ideas, this information, we are training. We use that word a lot in this system. We're training our awareness, we're training our perceptions, we are training our body mind in a different way to create these pathways of optimal function that go not just from the brain to the body, but from the body to the brain, and from the body and brain out into the field, which is beyond the body. It's out here. And so
Absolutely.
these practices help us connect with and affect positive change in all of these different levels of mind.
What you have described to me is not a, when we say seven levels of mind or seven, I'm going to call them domains.
Okay.
They're not a hierarchy. That is because they work holistically. And it may be easier for people to sort of unlock the connection and really develop one versus the other, because some people are more natural feelers, and feelers are going to open up different avenues of perception than the thinkers over here on the other side. This is to me, the whole system worked because the whole system was the whole system.
Yeah.
And it's when you can get all of the parts, okay, working in synchrony and coherence with each other. Whoa, that's when things just open incredibly.
That's when the magic happens, as you
Yeah.
talked about. It literally, I mean, it feels magical when you're able to connect with yourself on all of these different levels and bring it all into this one present moment where you're aware literally of what's going on with your physiology at maybe even a cellular level. Like just thinking right now, can you feel your heartbeat? I mean, you can if you take your pulse, and I encourage anybody who's watching this, when you take your pulse, you're literally becoming aware of what's going on inside of your body, about your heart, pushing all of that blood through your body so that you've got circulation, so that you're healthy, so that you're well. And um, this opportunity that we take to apply our attention and awareness to basic skills so that we can organize ourselves better, I think is really what this world is needing right now.
You mean the world is disorganized?
Well, it's February 3rd, 2025, just for reference, everybody.
That's right. Check your calendars.
Yeah, yes.
Is there a standard starting point
Yes.
for the work? For, Bill Spady comes in and wants to get engaged in your work. Where are you likely, sort of, where's the first level of diagnosis that you do as to, okay, then maybe the place to start, Bill, is over here, or
Yeah.
the place to start, Bill, is over there,
Yeah.
or is there just a standard place?
Yeah. And for Hike Revolution, there's a progression of learning, and it happens in layers, and everybody who goes through the Hike Revolution curriculum starts with spiral one. There are 16 spirals, and these are all spirals of self-development, self-transformation, and self-transmutation. Once you reach those higher levels of learning, we're moving kind of around the like in as a spiral, as a golden mean spiral, as we're expanding, as we're growing. And
Mhm.
so we're taking that into account. It's not just a circular spiral, it's actually a golden mean spiral that we are referring to. So we all start at spiral one. And in spiral one, we go through all of these basic concepts, like I'm discussing with you here, the 7 levels of mind. And then there are so many other concepts like right timing or auspicious days or propitious days or, practices to do for a full moon or practices to do for a new moon. But before all of that, we start with awareness and we start with breathing. So,
Mhm.
anybody who's watching this, you may already have an awareness practice. You may already have a breathing practice. And if you have those two things, then you are basically in a position of understanding two of your inner keys. This is how I calm myself by breathing. This is how I this is how I come to center. This is how I ground myself. And so the first practices for Hike for Evolution are heart rate variability training, which we often do in conjunction with biofeedback training. There's tons of research on heart rate variability training. Anybody who wants to go check out Heart Math, you can find a ton of information and scientific data on the benefits of heart rate variability training. What the purpose it serves in the Hike for Evolution system is to oxygenate the brain and to get a synchrony going between thinking and feeling and breathing. And as we bring thinking and feeling and breathing into a coherent state, that's one of the first times that magic begins to happen. Do you have an experience with that with Leanna? Thinking, feeling, and breathing.
Well, I remember the very basic little exercises I I did with heart rate variability. Very very simplistic, but what I learned is how gently I could breathe and how that gentleness of breath affected, okay, that it was this hot air balloon going over walls or climbing over mountains or something, and how one could just in the most subtle ways get that balloon moving, sinking, rising, etc. Um, boy, I mean, talk about awareness building and awareness of, things we absolutely take for granted in terms of the intensity of our normal breath. However
Yeah.
we do it, you know, it just comes in and out and it's just there. But
Yes.
the guidance, the power of that breath to affect things, including the other exercises, balancing the heat in both hands, etc. I mean, all these things sound so routine, but boy, they work the body mind. I mean, they you just begin to be aware. Okay, I
Yes.
mean, really aware of how things function. And therefore, it isn't just that you're aware when you're in the classes, you're aware all the time. And
That's right.
that's where the benefit is.
That's right. And I mean, could you imagine having a world full of aware people? How beautiful that would be. I know that when I was teaching any of this in elementary school classrooms, when I could get a classroom of 30 children to take 10 or 20 deep breaths together, it changes the entire feeling in the room. And so we are
Absolutely.
having a dramatic effect, not just on ourselves and on our nervous systems, but on our awareness and our ability to perceive the truth or reality, whatever's going on in any given moment. And so breathing is really the first step, awareness, and then knowing how to use your breath consciously and then using the tool of applying your focus and concentration to the task of having your awareness in the center of your chest while you're taking those equalized breaths. Equalized breathing is just inhale is just about as long as the exhale. The exhale might be slightly longer just to oxygenate the brain, just to get the nervous system calmed down a little bit so that we can actually begin doing some visualization. We would use a tool called Axis to begin visualizing. And Axis is really a practice that is from many ancient wisdom traditions. And it's really just thinking about a line of energy that runs from the top of your head to the tip of your tailbone. And physiologically, it's your backbone. And
Mhm.
so we're imagining, we're perceiving that we can actually make contact with our axis. So we move from breathing and awareness into perception of what's going on inside the body, centering through that practice of axis, and then grounding through the practice of three legs and then using our senses, color, aroma, taste, and sound to actually begin building neural pathways between all quadrants of the brain, all areas of the brain, front to back, back to front, top to bottom, bottom to top, right to left, left to right, so that we then have a lattice of connection within the brain so that information, wherever it's going, from front to back, back to front, side to side, it has pathways to go there. It creates this like super highway of pathways for us to move information, take information in, discern information, let go of information that doesn't need to be focused on. And we're just creating through the practice, through the regular disciplined practice, the
Mhm.
introductory practices of heart rate variability, axis, cats, three legs. This is how everybody begins. And following spiral one, where you would learn all of this material, then you would go into other practices, other information to consider while we are using this mindfulness and this meditation and this capacity to tell new stories and to visualize information and to recognize when we're discovering some inner keys and being able to just live that process. That's what we're doing with Hike for Evolution is creating evolution, really, personal evolution. Know yourself on all of these levels and see what happens.
You know, in terms of the word evolution, if I can go down that path for just a minute, um, but this is before I started working with Leona, but became aware of a system called spiral dynamics. And in spiral dynamics, they talk about the evolution of individuals and the evolution of societies, okay, following similar patterns. Okay. And it goes from the pattern of kind of strong ego, kind of strong individual, to when that gets a little out of control, to how the next evolutionary pattern flattens, flattens people out because it becomes more communal, it becomes more communicative and collaborative in nature. And then when that gets too strong, then you evolve up to another level of, as it were, the individual ego asserting itself, et cetera, et cetera. But the higher you go, and here's the basic point, the higher you go in your conscious evolution in that framework, the more aggression and whatever just fall away because there is more of a sense of connection to everything and everybody, that the whole impulse of being aggressive or dominating or whatever it is, it just, it's like, who needs this? And you come to recognize you just don't need this. Society doesn't need this. It's just hooked on a bad habit pattern of
Yeah.
deciding to have conflict and wars all the time, etc. And
Yeah.
I think the work, the multi-level, multi-dimensional awareness building is just in all these dimensions, just expanding that sense of I can be at peace
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, by just doing a few of the basic things that are these foundational introductory exercises that you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I agree with you that all of the aggression, all of the frustration, all of what is not really me falls away when I'm practicing regularly, when I'm using my practice as a daily discipline so that I can create that. We talked about creating willpower through that discipline of daily practice, and then that willpower becomes a fuel. It becomes a refined fuel that we can then use to propel our evolution.
So we're talking then about evolution, and um, in our first meeting, I brought up the issue and the example of the way in which Liana and the work that you're doing treats this framework called the Enneagram as an evolutionary tool rather than as a personality diagnosis instrument. Okay.
Yep.
Um, can you say a little about that? Because I know that's familiar to a lot of people who are
Yeah.
in the psychology world.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the Enneagram is a body of knowledge that has been promoted widely in psychology. And the Enneagram itself is a drawing, it's a picture that can really be used to describe a system. And that is how Leanna has used it in the Hike for Evolution system. She learned it from some Sufis when she was back in her much earlier life, and has evolved the Enneagram in the Hike for Evolution system to include energies and expressions of energies going everywhere along the pathway from information, water, earth, air, all of the elements, fire, wisdom. And so the Enneagram is really a map of our own evolution, and there are pathways on that enneagram that illustrate our developmental processes as we evolve. And so we might go through the cooker pathway, we might go through the gardener pathway, and in fact most of us will go through all pathways, the healer pathway, the uh, educator pathway, the master pathway. And so all of these pathways start and end in different places on the Enneagram, depending on where you are in your own personal developmental process.
Mhm. Well, could you say in your own case then that the evolutionary pathways for you began at a certain place or what a certain level, et cetera, and have have evolved to a specific point, or is it more a specific pattern configuration that things are working with each other differently than they did when you first started it, for example?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. I would say that I feel really blessed that I have been mentored by Leanna as closely as I have been because she purposefully walked me through all of the pathways in order. So I believe it's Gardner
Oh,
and then Cooker and so et cetera, et cetera. And it's taken years of developmental practice going through all of those pathways. It's not really something that you can just do in 3 months. Oh, hey, I'm going to evolve myself and I'm going to do the Gardner and the Cooker and the healer pathways. It's developing these qualities within ourselves through this disciplined practice of whatever it is that we're trying to create for ourselves. You had mentioned earlier about habits, and that's a really important concept because when we use our applied focus and concentration on a regular basis, developing new habits,
yes.
developing optimal habits. My optimal habit is I get up, I do my practices, I take a few minutes, I set some positive intentions. That's a practice that has meaning and purpose behind it for me versus just, waking up and turning on the coffee machine, which isn't a bad practice. And and there
Yes.
are other things that we can add to our daily routines that actually create opportunities for us to become more than we are right this minute.
I want to address what may be a more complex issue than we should be doing at this point. But all of us function in our lives with patterns, and most of the patterns are subconscious patterns. If you listen to people like Bruce Lipton, he can make a case that approximately 95% of our time, our living hours, okay, in a day is functioning out of habitual pattern, okay, which actually helps us function in life well. Because when we're driving a car and you see a red light, you know you're supposed to stop. You don't have to go through some big analytic process of, gee, how nice that red is and anything else, all right? But we can get stuck in patterns that leave us stuck. That is, we can't work beyond the pattern,
Yeah.
which has just become conditioned. And that to me is the difference between being conscious, that is, knowing what the pattern is, and choosing to either exercise it or not exercise it at a given time for the situation you face, versus just automatically, okay, doing it reactively, etc.
That's right.
How does the system help develop this perception of what pattern you're in, that where you might be stuck,
Yeah.
versus a pattern you're actually trying to cultivate that represents more freedom, more
Oh my
choice?
gosh. Yeah, I mean, that's the question of the probably infinite
Is that the
timeline.
question of all mankind
That might
forever?
be the question of all mankind.
All right.
Yeah, what I would say is this system helps. So, as we practice these practices, whether they are the somatic movements, whether they are images, whether they are a creative thinking process of some of these images or storylines, rewriting our personal stories, all of these would be tools that we would use within the Hike for Evolution system. We are, as we apply our focus and concentration to these new habits, we begin to see where the old habits want to come in and play. And depending on what the habit is, I mean, maybe it's something that is life affirming and nurturing, and you don't really want to edit it out. So you incorporate it. But if it's a habit of nervous system activation to actually go into fear or anxiety or panic when a certain stimuli happens, or like somebody turns on the news, or somebody hears a siren, or somebody, there are plenty of things that are triggering people, and we go into this pattern of heightened awareness of fear or anxiety or all of the things that bring people to my classes and into my office, those are the patterns we want to change. And so we start by doing these practices that we're not quite sure what benefit they're going to have. And I'll just give a little example of, say, mindfulness or meditation. When I was at Naropa, we took a meditation class because it's a Buddhist
Yep.
school. And my homework was to meditate for 5 minutes a day. Well, I couldn't find 5 minutes a day. And I told the teacher this, I just don't have 5 minutes a day to do this. And she actually threatened to fail me. And so I found 5 minutes a day so that I could pass that class. I started to meditate for 5 minutes a day. But what happened is it's become a decades long practice because in a very short period of time, I started to recognize that that 5 minutes a day was actually helping me become more conscious and aware.
Hmm.
It's something I didn't want to do and I resisted it wholeheartedly, but I applied myself to it. And I think that's where people get hung up or get hooked is they want it to be easy. They want to take a medication, they want to take a pill, they want to flip a switch. And for most of us, we actually have to make efforts to change.
I think that what you've just said is one of the most important things for people to understand who want to get on any, whether we call it a path or program or anything else, of inner growth, of personal growth. Okay, because they they don't want to have to struggle. They don't want to have to work. But a lot of the things that we have built up in our lives that we're calling patterns, that we could be calling habits, okay, keep us locked in.
Yeah.
And even though we don't like them, okay, we say, oh, this just doesn't work for me. They're a comfort zone. They're a familiarity, and people stay there and don't know how to move beyond them.
Yeah.
Now,
Yep.
this is not a program that Liana has. I mean, she's insistent. She goes irate if you say this is a program of therapy. It's
It's not.
not. See, it's not therapy, but the
Yeah.
effects and benefits are enormously therapeutic.
They
All
are.
right.
It's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah, could you say a little more about that in terms of we're not trying to what fix people, heal
Yeah.
people, et cetera, per se, but the
Yeah.
benefits go and move people in that direction.
It's so true. And I've had so many conversations with Leanna, the founder of Hike for Evolution, about this very thing. I'm a psychotherapist, so I deal with people who already, they either come to me with the diagnosis or I give them a diagnosis because that's how we operate in this field in this industry, but she has insisted this is not for illness people, is what she says. This is not for
Mm.
sick people, but it works for sick people. I'll tell you that in my psychotherapy practice, I have seen these practices help people pull themselves out of like lifelong depressive patterns, lifelong anxiety patterns, because they're actually working at the somatic level with an awareness of a desire to create a change within them. So even though Leanna didn't want to teach people she didn't want this to be part of the illness model. And that's really what our medical model is here in the United States, is it's an illness model. It's not really about getting people better. And I would be happy to argue that with any of the physicians who are watching this right now. But we would make it fun. This is really about taking yourself from a like I'm good state to I'm great state. And I know most of the people in my proximity would love to be at great.
Ah, yes. Yeah, we have a culture that promotes greatness in often very, very superficial ways, rather than really, let's call it multidimensional qualitative ways.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
I'm going to switch gears here with a final question, because this may get us, at least for this video, may get us into a quagmire that can't be answered. Okay.
Okay.
But in the work that I did with Liana, um, she became increasingly convinced that when we talk about patterns and pathways, it was not just of the neurons in the brain, but it was about those other cells that get ignored, which are called the glial cells.
Yeah.
And she said, that's where real higher consciousness may live. And that's where real higher consciousness gets activated when you have some of these kind of astonishing experiences like
Yeah.
I had working with her, okay, where you're just going into what seems like a different reality, all right, and functioning very well in that other reality, but it's not the neurons in the brain doing that. It's these other mysterious kinds of cells. So at one level, the work is work that tries to get those cells activated.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that fair to say? Have
I,
I? Yeah.
I would say that was why she had this proprietary system developed with a range of 250 hertz versus the
Yes.
standard 100 or 90 or 100 hertz, because that gamma, as we train and as we increase our amplitude across the 250 hertz, then I believe that's when we begin to access those glial fields, which then cause messages. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so anybody who wants to correct this, please message Bill and I'll let him feel corrected. But
Yes.
that once we've activated and trained for glial increase, then, or I'm sorry, for gamma increase, then we are able to access those glial fields, which then become like cellular phones versus like a landline, where you're going from one part to the other part of the brain on a pathway versus an electromagnetic burst of information, light
Mm.
or energy versus a physical pathway.
Well, um, I think we're going to pick up this next question in the next session, because she has talked with me about how we are really electromagnetic beings. And you just said the magic words there. All right.
Bioelectromagnetic.
Yes, bioelectromagnetic. Okay, that's even better. Thank you very much. Because this is starting to sound too esoteric, too complex, because this woman has created this multi-dimensional system that seems to work if you work at it long enough, hard enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think most of the people watching this video, as you had said a minute ago, aren't going to want to work that hard. So the question is on a range from everybody can benefit from this into you can go into outer space if you want to. That's different levels of, I'm going to say, dedication and
Yeah.
focus and application that you have to be willing to undergo if that's where you want to go.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, Bill, it's such a small time commitment to create these results. Really, 7 minutes a day is all that's required to practice these basic practices. And then some, you can add however many others you would like in there. If you really feel like you got to meditate for 30 minutes, go ahead. But 7 minutes of applied focus and concentration is enough to get you where you want to go. So it's not even like it's this huge amount of effort that you have to make, but it's enough effort that when you start to reap the benefits of it, you're like, okay, that's actually worth it.
Um, I'm going to conclude with this one and with a request. Okay, in our next conversation, let's talk in more detail about those specific practices that you have people engage in, that they do in the famous 7 minutes a day. Okay, and what your understanding is of why those practices work.
Yeah.
Okay, why, I mean, what it is that they're unfolding and why they really do activate people, I'm going to say in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah,
The, the,
absolutely.
the piece of information I'm going to throw out here in sort of in conclusion, I'd like you to comment on, and that is that Liana was explaining to me that in terms of activating the gamma frequencies, the higher consciousness frequencies, et cetera, that the system is able to do in a remarkably short amount of time what it was taking Buddhist monks 30 years to do of meditation, of standard meditation work, et cetera, et cetera. Can you can you conclude this with this exciting sort of piece of information, and we'll pick it up next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's research. There was a group of monks that came over here and did some work at the University of Wisconsin, I believe.
I
And
think
they
that's
were,
right.
yep, they were measuring their brainwave states and then measuring the brainwave states of people who were not meditators for lifelong periods of time. And the monks are able to achieve certain frequencies, certain states of consciousness, which are measured by the standard uh, graphs, and anybody who's familiar with biofeedback and neurofeedback training would know what they would be looking at. And those monks are lifelong practitioners, but you can get there. You can develop your own brain in that way in less than 3 years, really. And you can have an effect on your cognition now within 6 to 9 weeks. It's really incredible just through that discipline of daily practice. And if you add biofeedback and neurofeedback to it, it speeds it up even more.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, thank you. Wow, what a stimulating hour this has been. Thank you so much. And we'll do a next time. And
Sounds great.
next time is going to be, well, getting sort of stepping into the practices, okay, and
Yeah. Yes.
concretely showing people this is what you can do. This is how this builds.
Yeah.
And everything you have said about those, I mean, they're all familiar to me, but I'm sure our audience out there is saying, what does she mean by that? So
Yeah.
let's talk about what they are next time. How about that?
Sounds great. Will do. Okay. Thank you, Bill. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Absolutely. Bye bye.